excited to be here with you guys today. I have two really good friends of mine, both leaders in the church, powerful leaders in the church. One we got from Florida, Dillon Ritchie. He's the executive director of ministries, soon to be executive pastor. Way to go. Congratulations. He oversees all ministries there in Venice, Florida. Coast Life Church has been an incredible church, seen some just tremendous growth over the last few years. Just got into a new building that, of course, now you're experiencing some space issues, which we call those full net problems, but problems nonetheless. We've got Brian Bowden, who's from Baytown, Texas, right outside the Houston area with Faith Family Church. You guys also have been experiencing some incredible growth for the last 5 years or so, up and to the right, active and a part of that team since really the very beginning. Of course, many roles you have played throughout that journey, but you're associate pastor now, helping lead a location as well, also help launch the location. So a lot of things there have tracked back to you guys. So this has been a thought and an idea I've had for really a couple months. I'm just really excited to spend some time with you because what I've seen you both do really, really well is develop something that we help churches with all the time, and that's creating a key component of their leadership pipeline. Just a few months ago, we released a resource on the concepts of how to build the sustainable leadership pipeline. And I introduced in there this concept of a threshold training. So how do you go from one level of leadership to the next?
Right.
So to be from a team member to a team leader to coordinator, coordinator to director. You check that out on the resource. You can see what I'm talking about there. Have it pulled up. It'll make a lot of sense when we talk about this. But I've had the privilege of working with both of you guys as you've developed these, and I've gotten to really witness firsthand the impact of this concept. Now that it's built out though, and you're building on it, I wanted to have some conversation of what was the journey like? Because when we introduce this, a lot of times it's like, really, Philip, another thing? We got to do something else? Like, what about all the other stuff we're doing? And it's easier in this seat from the outside to say, I think there's very little things you should do instead of this, because really we live and die by the ability to develop other people and to have people that are ready to say yes to opportunities like new services or new locations. So all that is backdrop. Let's just dive into it. So when first hearing about the concept of a threshold training for a leadership level specifically, what do you remember thinking? What was going through your mind? How mad at me were you? I'll lay it out there.
Well, it's funny because right before this call, Dylan had texted me and he said, whatever we do, please let me answer the first question. I've got a word in my heart from the Lord. So, Dylan, I just want to honor you and your request.
Oh, you're going to give it to him. All right, go for it.
I'm just going to honor you and what you got going on, man. I mean, you've got palm trees on your shirt, baby.
That's
I'm wearing a
Coast Life
cardigan. It's like you obviously are got the trump card, so let's roll. Let's go.
Well, that's what I was going to say is how many days is this going to take me away from the beach was my first thought. How many hours am I going to invest that I can't invest in my suntan? So
yeah, you found a way to make it work. I'll say that.
Yeah, but I think honestly, and Phil, what's really cool is that my ministry journey actually lines up with the genesis of our relationship in Focus 412. I was coming in with very little ministry experience, which in a way, it allowed me to not be hindered to and to be open to what it is that you were communicating and what it is that you were talking about and saying we needed to prioritize. So when you started to elaborate on this idea, I think is when it really started to set in, like how big this was going to be and how much this was going to take. What I didn't know at the time was the return on investment. I knew it was going to be a huge investment up front, but the return that we've seen on this investment is far greater than anything we've ever invested to make it work. So I'm grateful that you pushed through and you pushed beyond the doubts and the questions, because what we've seen as a result of this has been incredible to Life Our Church.
I think for us, you kind of came into the Faith Family Church space too at such an important time for us, because we were growing at such a rapid rate, being portable too. We understood firsthand the challenge and the need for more leaders, and we were doing some things to develop them. But when you kind of shift gears and think about the strategic approach, pairing it up with a very clear pipeline, this was kind of stuff that we knew in some ways that we needed, but didn't really know how to get there. And you came in and you were able to really kind of paint a picture for us. And then we were able to kind of back it up from where we wanted to be. So we would design the end in mind, thinking about each different layer or level, and then think, okay, how can we put the tools in the toolboxes of those leaders so they can actually do the very thing that we're called to do? And that's equip them for ministry.
Yeah. I mean, there's this temptation when you actually get introduced to the idea about threshold trainings, you're not just looking at one threshold, you're looking at
Yeah.
like three or four. So you can
Yes.
feel instantly overwhelmed with like, oh crud. And it's like, well, don't do it all at once. Pick one and just do something with it. And I
Yes.
think that's what hopefully helps people realize like if you can prioritize that development of a layer of leadership and you take all leaders through it, it at least raises the level of leadership for all leaders, even if it's just doing something or even if it's just a little bit. um by the way, this is not meant to be like Phil, I didn't teach you everything. Like I want to learn from you guys, like you guys, because
Yeah.
you've taken concepts and you've made them far better than I ever could. And the cool part about this and the Focus 412 really family is we get to use stuff from Faith Family now. We get to use stuff from Coast Life, and Coast Life and Faith Family get to help other churches, and they're making it better. And then because of the relationship, I get to say, you guys seen and heard what these guys are doing? Like they're making y'all look silly. And that's the hope, is that somebody right now is listening to this and you're like,
Yes.
I'm gonna make it better.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, please let us know what it is so we can share it with others. Um, okay, so conceptually we say create a training to help, and we call I call it threshold specifically because we need people to pass through it to get to the other side of leadership.
Yeah.
So, but the content of that leadership training is the next blockade. So, do we even have time to do this? And even if we did have time to do this, what would we cover? Really becomes the next barrier. Go back to your first version. That's what I also love about you guys is you've run this now for multiple years in multiple formats. What helped you tackle that hill um, to say, okay, this is what we're going to put in it?
Um, I'll go first, I guess.
Oh, no, Brian.
Yeah, I think for us, for the first thing I did was I took a little bit of pressure off myself to just try to be the next leadership guru training Stephen Furtick-esque guy. It's like, okay, number one, there's an abundance of leadership content out there right now. Like even the leadership space in general, it's kind of like a buffet. You can go like kind of pick and choose 1,000 different podcasts or whatever based on what you want to learn. So for us, it was like, what do we actually want our people to be equipped to do at the end of this 12 weeks? And that's how we run ours. We do 12-week semesters, and it coincides with our small group semesters in the spring and in the fall. So it's a very clear on ramp and a very clear off ramp. And so we just went Philip Ingalls style, got out a whiteboard because brother loves him a whiteboard. Brother be getting a whiteboard out there and it could be
It's in the
done.
office.
Oh
Oh, that's
my
all I
God.
need. That's all I need. I mean, really,
When he
Jesus and a
rolled a white
whiteboard.
when he rolled a whiteboard out and wrote down his Instagram handle, I thought it's too much.
Stop it. That's
Too
so
much.
ridiculous.
A whiteboard for Phil at our
That's so ridiculous. That's true. I've helped a lot of churches actually get a whiteboard. My
Yes.
Instagram help me and my 6 followers. That's great. They all came from your church.
Oh, that's funny. But that's what we did. We took a whiteboard out and we started writing down what we thought they needed to know, and we kind of put it in 3 buckets. And you guys have them. It's the character piece, the competency piece, the culture piece. Who we want them to be as leaders, why we believe and do what we do, and then the what behind it. And I think we had 20 things written down. And then we said, okay, where can we kind of break this down? Where can we kind of make some adjustments? We got it down to 12 weeks, and that's what we did. And it started out as a 12-week small group,
That's awesome.
and
Dylan,
then
you
we
had
just
this.
built it from there.
I was going to say, you guys had a similar approach. Talk about it because you also have a fourth bucket, and I think that's exciting.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I want to highlight something Brian said at the beginning, you had said begin with the end in mind. And I will tell you that that is probably needs to be a foundational piece of building out your threshold training. Is the end in mind. What do you want the result of this training to be? What is this individual going to look like if this process is effective? And then, like you said, work backwards from there. Well, if this is what I want them to be, and this is what I want them to do, then what do I need to teach them and train them on to make them become this person? And it cuts out a lot of stuff. It cuts out a lot of the here's 10 tips to being a better communicator, or because maybe communicator isn't in your leadership profile.
100%.
What I wanted to get to is like create a leadership profile. Who
Yes.
people need to be, or who do you want them to be, and let your leadership profile drive your content.
Okay, I'm gonna cut in
What's
because
that?
not every. What is a leader profile? Like, I'm gonna cut in because somebody's hearing that is like, what does that mean? You got it, Brian? You want me to hit it real quick? What do you want to
Hit
do?
it. Hit
Okay,
it. Hit it.
it's the qualities and the characteristics that you look for in a leader. Because if you've ever had somebody bring you a name to your desk and say, I think they should be a good leader, and you quickly cringe, that means you have a filter that they don't have, and you have to articulate that filter so that they can use that filter to look at other people. Okay, go ahead. Brian, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna say that's why we as leaders we have this incredible responsibility to bring a lot of clarity to that before we ever develop something like this. As Dylan said so well, so many times we just try to put something together and we don't really have a clear picture of where we actually want to take these people to because we haven't done the hard work to define it. And then later on we get frustrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Phil, you had mentioned that we do have a fourth bucket, and it's theological congruence.
Mm,
So, post COVID, post 2020 world, we saw the great shakeup. We saw a lot of people leave that we thought were heart and soul.
mm.
And when it came down to it, it was differences in theological beliefs. Many of them were open-handed issues. There were a few. It was closed-handed issues. It was like, oh, I'm not even really sure you believe in Christianity. But the majority of them were open-handed issues that we can have some conversations about. But the reality is that as leaders at this church, we're fine with diversity on theological issues in the seats. We're going to pastor people, and we're gonna help them through those conversations. We're not as open to that on our leadership team. You're going to believe what we believe, and that's in every area. That's on cultural issues as well as that's on church issues, tithing, giving, sanctity of life, all of these things. We're going to have a stance on them, and our leadership is going to have to align with what we believe Scripture says about these things. And that's really, really that's been beneficial to us post 2020. I shared this stat with my pastor um, the other day, and that is we've had 312 people go through our threshold training, and 298 of them are still at the church.
It's awesome, man. That's killer.
It's because we were extremely clear, like you said, Brian, we are extremely clear about what we expect, what we believe, and the individual we are trying to train up and release. So,
That's really good. Yeah, it's really hard to teach something and have an expectation that they'll help us pro- propel the culture forward or help bring people into opportunities to serve if we're not in alignment with those very same beliefs. Or man, that's great. Okay, now we're in the classroom. We've boiled it down. We've got our content. What have you done to include into your training some diversification of the learning approach, right? So not everybody learns classroom style, fill in the blank, watch the video of pastor, play, like what do you do, now, and I'm going to back up a little bit. You said you did yours first one in a small group setting. Dylan, you've got yours more as like I don't want to call it it's not a classroom setting, but you've kind of integrated into its own night, has its own event, almost its own event that they go through for a short period of time. Talk a little bit about how you made the choice of how to apply this first before we get into what we cover, how we cover those.
Yeah, I get started. We started out with a small group because I wanted to know if anybody would actually be interested in it. and I wanted to give myself a safe space to make a lot of mistakes. So I told him, I was like, "You guys are like the beta testing group." But as I think now our leadership academy is probably very similar to what Dylan's doing,
Okay.
where it does probably feel a little bit more like an event. I mean, now we've got 3 different groupings of threshold training happening every Tuesday night. So on a typical Tuesday, you've got 6 different learning environments happening. And so what we try to do is there's a diversification of the content, meaning I try not to have 2 competency type teachings go back to back because I want there to be 2 different styles. Every lesson that we have, the teacher is instructing for about 35 minutes, and then there's something practical that takes place after that. It
That's great.
could be discussions within a group because they actually group up throughout the semester. It could be a practical application. We have a night where we teach people how to do our dream team huddles that they lead with their teams. Well, we teach them how, and then we break them off into groups, and they all have to lead a huddle amongst each other. And I don't tell them ahead of time because all the introverts would panic if they knew
Of
that was
course.
happening.
Of course.
And then
But
we
they're
do
some
have
of the best ones that do it, aren't they?
yeah. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then we have some nights too where it's kind of an all-in-one night, and it'll be me and maybe interviewing Pastor Josh. So I try to bring diversity, not just in what's being taught, but how it's being taught and even who's teaching it over that 12 weeks.
So good.
Yeah, that's great. So when we launched our leadership pipeline, um, we had actually, and Phil, you had come in on this, we had actually gotten to a place as a church where we had bumped our heads. We had hit a lid. Um, and not only did we stop growing, but we started to experience some decrease. And really what it boiled down to was we had a leadership problem. We had a lot of people running around with titles and not a lot of leaders that were equipped to lead people. So really what we ended up doing was we put together this idea of what we wanted to look like. And at that time, it actually had the character, the competency, and the culture sections. And we ran a 1 day on a Saturday, and we ran all 3 sessions on that Saturday. And that was only for people who were in leadership roles at the church already. So before we took anybody new through it, we wanted to get all of our current leaders caught up. That was the one and only time we did the 1 day. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And I don't know how effective that was. But really what it did is we took the sessions and we extended them out over nights.
Yeah.
So what was done in 3 sessions over 1 day was then done in 3 sessions over 3 days, 3 consecutive weeks. And then from there, we just built it out. Do we need a fourth one? Yeah, we need a fourth one. Well, why don't we put some of this into practice? So let's put together a practicum night. Okay, well, there's a fifth night. And we built it out. And so when I talk to people about building a threshold training, um, you have to do this in steps. It's really important you do this in steps. You don't try to build Highlands College overnight. Um, you start with what you need, and you start with the end in mind. And then from there, as you walk this thing out, you'll start to understand, okay, we need to add this step, we need to add this thing in order to make this more effective. So we've gotten to 10 weeks. And then we actually launched what is now 2.0, a second level of threshold training. But again, it was out of necessity, it was out of need.
Yes.
What we were trying to take people to next, the next milestone for leaders. Start small, let it grow.
You're
For
talking.
us,
Go. No,
okay.
go.
No, I was gonna say for us, I mean, what Dylan said is so right. I mean, for us, it's taken us 7 years to get to this point. So you got to start slow. And I would say only do what you can do that's sustainable.
Great.
You don't want to be at week 7 and hating your life. So do what you can do that's going to be excellent, sustainable, and get you to the end that you wanted to be at.
Yeah. Brian and Dylan told me it had to be at least 12 weeks. You know,
Ah!
exactly. You're speaking to something I tell people all the time is like start where you can and pick what's going to add the most value immediately. And oftentimes you have way more attendees than you have team members, and you have way more team members than you have team leaders.
Yeah.
So team leaders is the best threshold, I would say, because we oftentimes have a next steps class or a connect class or a starting point class or whatever you want to call it. That's actually a threshold training. So like if you're hearing this, like you already have a threshold training. You just do it on Sunday mornings. or Sunday afternoons or whenever you do it, you already have it. It's the graduate level of that for leaders specifically. And start with only 3 weeks. Start with only 4 weeks. I like what you're doing is you grandfathered everybody in so that nobody could, because this is inevitable. Well, when I started serving, we blank. And it's like, what we're doing is we're creating a new expectation. And what we have to do is give everybody the opportunity to align with the new expectation. And
So
we
good.
can't do that if we don't teach them the new expectation. And so I like doing that, like retrain, put everybody through it, even if they're not just a team leader, they're a coordinator or even a director, so that everybody's hearing the same language. And then beyond that, I call it the new normal. Okay, after you do the fast track one day, or if you do it over multiple, whatever, it's now the new normal. This is how we're operating. And then get in that cycle, that rhythm, however you want it to be done long term, whatever is sustainable. I like how you said that. Practice it that way. And you're so right. Build on it, build on it, build on it. Because you'll find, and this was one of my questions that I had is like round one versus round two, round one versus today, I'm sure looks entirely different because what was groundbreaking 3 years ago when you guys started this was now entry level. That actually might now be in your volunteer training. What used to be leader qualifications is now like, no, our base volunteers now operate that way. So, talk about what you've learned since you've put that in practice, what you wish you may have heard or known, because we got somebody who doesn't even have one that can help them maybe, save on your stupid tax that you guys paid.
Well, Phil, one of the things that you said that I think is so important is if you have an assimilation process, you have the foundations for this. It's like people have a growth track or they have some type of way to assimilate people onto the team. And then they're like, I don't know how to build a leadership pipeline. And I'm like, what do you think assimilation class is?
Right.
Totally, man.
It's the first step of your leadership pipeline. So if you've built out a healthy growth track or a healthy assimilation process, you have the bones for a leadership pipeline. Now, obviously, it's going to get a lot more robust. And some of the information, some of the content is going to be a little bit more intense. But the reality is that if the assimilation process is working for you, allow that to be the outline for how you develop your leadership pipeline. If it's not working, don't. And on the flip side, I would tell you that and I've seen this, if you do not have an assimilation process or you do not have a growth track, do not launch a leadership pipeline.
It's great.
Because literally, like I go to help churches sometimes in this area, and we're talking leadership pipeline, and I'm like, well, how do people get on team? Oh, well, they sign up for a team and they start serving, and I'm like, so you just got the wild wild west out there. Anybody with a pulse and
Right.
can serve at church, and it's like I don't know that I would operate like that because what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for failure
Yeah. Yeah.
because you have to put them through the first filter of like, do they like our church, or are they serving because they're friends here on Sundays and they got nothing else to do on a Sunday morning?
Well, and you even back that up and you're saying, is our culture clear enough to even communicate it to somebody who could carry it as a team member? Which that's probably we need to do a prerequisite call on assimilation. So maybe just earmark your calendar for
Right.
another time because that's so true. Is saying, can we articulate our culture to even define that so that volunteers are carrying that, but then you can continue to build on it. And if you are hearing that, like culture, character, competency, it's the same framework for an assimilation class. Like
Yeah.
talk about who you are, talk about the competencies that you want them to carry, whether they're on teams or in groups. The minute they put a lanyard or shirt on, they're representing you, whether you like it or not, whether you train them or not. So you might as well invest in that training. Brian, what did you figure out over the years?
I'm still learning, still trying to figure it out. I think, for me, when I go back to some of the original classes and environments that we had created, I think I probably cared a little bit more about those than the people that were actually sitting in the room. So there's this thought too, where you design with the end in mind, but then another filter that I apply is how and what are we teaching that's going to add the most value to that individual. Because I think sometimes too, we can get caught up in thinking, okay, we're building leaders for the church, right? And we are. And that's a beautiful byproduct of all of this, but we're building those leaders for them because this is a very important part in their own discipleship process. So I look at it from a little bit different of a perspective now in the sense where maybe that's higher up on the priority list than it would have been 8 years ago, where I'm thinking about their pathway, their discipleship with God. Okay, what's going on in their life? Because you can't grow spiritually if you don't serve. And I
Yes.
believe that all of us are called to lead in some capacity. And so it's thinking about how those people can take whatever's being shared and make it real in their life and add value in their life that even goes be outside of that goes outside of the local church, which in some ways are some of the best like compliments that we can get when we find out that it's helping them in their marriages or people are getting raises because of something that their boss has seen is changing them. So it's thinking about that person holistically and their spiritual journey that they're going through. And the fact at the end of the day that, we get so beautifully privileged to be able to empower these people and to teach these people and to take them on this journey. And so
You're saying something that I again, even as we're having a conversation, I'm realizing, oh man, I presuppose some of this because when we're in the room talking about it, we're introducing this concept. You just hit on a major factor that we don't create a threshold training because we just want something from people. But it's
100%.
Ephesians 4:11 and 12. We exist, leaders in the church exist to equip people for the work of ministry, not just at the church, but at home, at work. Like you have to think of this training as a holistic. It is something that helps them be a better leader. Period.
Why do most churches think I need some kind of threshold training to develop leaders? Most of them get to that place. Why?
They need leaders.
They don't have them.
Yeah,
They
that's right.
need them. Oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end. What are we gonna do? So it's a reaction. It's a reactionary response to meet a need that's currently not being met. And in an effort to do so, if we're not careful, we can misalign priorities. I think there's a really beautiful way to do both, where it not only adds strength to the individual, because if you'll add strength to the individual and you'll pastor and lead them well, they'll add strength to the church.
All right, I'm going to retool my leadership
Go
training.
ahead and just like
Okay.
scrap it, start from scratch, bro.
There are people that would separate this idea of threshold training and discipleship
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally would.
Yeah.
because the traditional idea of discipleship is Bible study. It's me and a group of guys sit down at a coffee shop and we talk about what we're seeing in scripture. And believe me, I am not against that process whatsoever. But leadership training, threshold training is a form of discipleship.
100%.
And we do ourselves a disservice when we don't treat it that way. Because there is an opportunity, like you said, Brian, to make a significant investment into the person through this process that is going to make them a better Christian. It's going to make them a
Yes.
follower of Jesus. And as a result of that, you're going to get a better leader. I will argue backwards and forwards the best leaders in the world today are church leaders.
100%.
There is an element that you get in the church that you don't get anywhere else. And we have to include that in our threshold training.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the power of the Holy Spirit. Like that's the thing that nobody else has. So we
Mhm.
have the ability to lock that in. And the minute they are placed, they now have 6, 8, 10, possibly 12 other team members that they're now using that with. And so it's like, yeah, it might take a long time to identify the content, find a way that I'm going to strategize the class, shoulder tap the right people to get into the room, and then take them through the process. But you will see yeah, I hope I'm not overstepping, but it's like you'll see an immediate return on that investment, even though it's a long-term investment. You'll see fruit right away. So if I give any of you all our encouragement, it's saying it's worth making the space for, and including it. But it's not just like we were talking about. It's not just Wild Wild West out there. Like, hey, we're just doing a leadership Bible study. Like it's because that oftentimes does attract the wrong people that we actually don't. necessarily want. They think they're good for leadership, but maybe actually aren't a good fit for leadership within the house. So how do you wrestle with that? Because I know you guys, both of your classes are a little bit different, or how you guys even promote it is a little bit different. How do you qualify that somebody's ready for leadership as they go through the journey, as they go through the training? Because something, again, don't presuppose, is just because you're in the class doesn't necessarily mean you're placed in leadership afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, I think for this to have a culture of leadership within your church, which is the only way something like this works, it has to be complete buy-in from the top down. So leadership development isn't something that we do per se. This is just who we are. And from your staff down to every layer of leadership at the dream team level, we all want to be thinking, who's next? Who's God entrusted to us? Who's going to take that next step? So that's one part about this that could be really cool is now everybody's taking a level of ownership for the people that God's placed under their care to say, how can I help that person take their next step? So when it comes to some of these maybe qualifications that we're talking about, well, when your entire team knows the leadership pipeline, understands and values the culture of the house, is helping people take their next steps spiritually, then everybody's kind of mining for people within their own area to say, no, this is the guy. No, we got to get Susie in the leadership academy because you know what? She's great with people. And I think one day she could be a captain. And so this is when that happens, then you're not like shotgun blasting a group email hoping that somebody's going to show up. Because here's what I found: the best leaders that you'll ever have and find are the people you're going to have to go after. The people that you're going to have to sell, that you're going to have to take to coffee, that you're going to have the ICAU conversation, the person that you're going to have your stuff dialed in before you even give them the big ask. Those are the great leaders. The people that have a ton of time in their schedule and can just say yes to anything, there's probably a reason they have a ton of time in their schedule. I'm just saying, I don't know how they do it in Florida.
Well,
Okay,
you
I don't
know,
know how they do it. Just talking about Texas, baby. But hopefully that makes sense. That's why for us it is quite organic in the sense of people at every layer kind of thinking about, okay, who are we bringing into this next? And so there's a mentor component.
For me, content is negotiable
Yes.
for the threshold training based on your church. One item that is not negotiable in your threshold training is teaching those in the room what your leadership profile is, because then you have now given them your eyes.
Mhm.
So teach whatever you think is most appropriate for your culture in your church, but do not ever exclude the leadership profile from the content, because then those people become your greatest weapon and mobilizers for influencing your leadership team, because then now they're looking for what you're looking for. And the more and more people you get looking for what you're looking for, the better opportunity that you have to reach the people you're trying to reach. In the room.
yeah, you're teaching them to think critically. Like, I think sometimes we just, if you're with me long enough, you'll learn circumstance by circumstance. Don't do this in this situation, do this in this situation, don't do this in that situation. And that just extends your leadership development so long because I have to see everything in every situation. And then it's almost a mimicry instead of I now have embodied the principle. And I say it's contextualized learning. So in this context, I'm doing this because of this, and this. I'm actually narrating my leadership, telling them why I'm thinking that way. And so I'm giving them more of the principles behind it. It's the same thing. We all got kids. It's like you tell your 3-year-old, don't touch the stove because you don't want them to touch the stove. Hot, cold, I don't care. Don't touch it. Because there's a possibility you would burn yourself. So it's very rule based, circumstantial. Whereas your older kids, you tell them, when you say don't touch the stove, they're critically thinking the stove must be hot. And
Right.
if I touch it, I'll burn my hand. They're doing it innately. Well, that doesn't just get, I guess that just gets caught over time because it just took them time to observe and to figure it out. But we could fast track that if we just say, don't touch the stove because it's hot. If it's hot, you'll burn your hand. So when I say, hey, don't touch the stove, and it takes a little bit more time to do, but my gosh, it releases so much. into the culture. So I would say, as you look at your content and you develop what you're doing, have practical scenarios, but root it into principles that can be transferable, regardless if I'm kids, greeters, ushers, parking lot. Doesn't matter. We're trying to teach level leadership concepts that can be applied to any lane of ministry. All right, I want you guys to brag a little because you guys have had this now. You've put it in place. You've had a couple of different rounds, but I know you've been able to do things that you probably wouldn't ever been able to say yes to because you had this leadership pipeline really pumping. So with this in place and what you've been able to do that you may not have been able to do without it, share a little bit about what you guys have experienced the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think the
If you
biggest
don't brag, I'll just call you out because I know what I want y'all to talk about.
here I think is probably the biggest brag that we have is Phil. You sat down with our team a little while ago, and we planned for a second location, and we filled an org chart for a second location before we ever opened it, and that is a direct result of the work we've put in and the process that we've developed. Like, not only do we have a full org chart at this location, but we were able to sit in a room and fill an org chart for a second location of people we don't have to train, they've been trained.
So good.
So day one, we're walking in and we're saying, not only do we have the opportunity to reach a new region, but we have the leaders that have the capacity to do it. Uh, and that has put full confidence into our lead pastor and into our team to say, let's launch this thing because we're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah, I mean, for us, this has been probably one of the single most contributing factors for us being able to sustain growth over the last several years because we've had the leaders in place not just to sustain the growth from a ministry side, but even from a pastoring the people side, which is ultimately what we're doing. We're shepherding the sheep. Tying on along with what Dylan said, we launched a campus a couple of years ago, and one of the greatest compliments that we received then and still now is we're preparing to launch more. This feels just like Faith Family Church, and that was really important for me. It was really important for the leaders that we were going to see to that campus, and then the leaders that they were going to train underneath them was that this feels like Faith Family Church. And so for me, anytime somebody says that, it's one of the biggest compliments because people are experiencing the same thing. And that's all because of the leaders. It's not just because of what's communicated from the stage, because it's actually a very small part of it in comparison to everything else. It's those leaders that carry the culture and the heart of the house, just as Dylan said so well. They've all got the same set of eyes. We're all looking at this with the same perspective, and we're pastoring people with the same perspective. So whether regardless of what location that you're at, what service time you go to, it may look and feel a little bit different, but it's Faith Family Church. And that is the win.
That's so good. The thing I know people experience because we go through this process of creating an org chart and then we start taking who we currently have in leadership roles and we paste it to the org chart. And that's when we reveal a lot of gaps. And that can be daunting as well. And that's why we introduce leadership threshold training is to say, let's get some new people into leadership in place. But to go from seeing a bunch of gaps, because I know we were all there together, different place, different time. We were there and we saw the gaps. To go from gaps to where I know both of you have had a spot where we've had a conversation and said, one, celebrate, ice cream party, whatever we did. Like our leader layers are filled. To now, what do I do with all the leaders I have? And you guys had to both create co-lead positions, co-captain, co-coordinator positions. Like I want those that are watching and those that we've talked to about this to know like it feels like a hill that you cannot climb. But this is the exciting part of this whole conversation. Like where I wanted us to get to is I wanted people to have hope that not only can I fill the current gaps, but I'll have so much it's an overflow that if when my pastor says we need to go to a third service, fourth service, we need to launch a campus, that we're not like crud, what do we do? And have our hands so tight. He was like, but then I'm going to lose my leaders. Then we won't have to say, oh, so glad because I thought I was like Steven's ready for the next layer of leadership, or he's ready for the next challenge, or that we can almost say yes with a happy heart, excited to let him go. You guys are a testament to that. So I'm just grateful that you guys have, one, done the hard work. You've let it work and then tweak the work as it's gone, so that you guys can experience some good fruit. Any like last thoughts, any things you would challenge anybody that's sitting here thinking, okay, now it's my turn? What would you encourage them with?
What you just said is so important. Let it cook. Let it cook. Like sometimes I'll try to help churches in this area, and literally they'll be like, "Well, we tried that and it didn't work." And I'm like, "Well, how long did you try it for?" And they're like, "Well, we ran it for a semester." And no wonder it didn't work.
Right,
You know what I mean? Like I couldn't ride a bike the first time I got on it too. Um, but I learned how to ride a bike because I kept getting back on it.
right.
Sometimes we just throw the bike away when it's really just us that needs to go through the process of learning. So let it cook, let it simmer, tweak it as it goes. Don't ever throw it in the garbage. Probably what you outlined and what you started with is at least bones for what you ultimately want to. But don't throw it in the garbage because out of the first season you didn't get the next great lead pastor or campus pastor. Like
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
give ourselves some grace. Let's go on a journey and trust your gut, trust your team.
You just said, I'm going to interject because you just said something, because the assumption that we'll produce the next campus pastor, but we created a threshold training for team leaders. That's why you're also frustrated. Like,
Yeah,
don't overshoot, overpunt your coverage. Like, remember why you created this. This was to help right size your level, your leadership at that level. If you're looking for campus pastors, well, we got to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what campus pastor development environment do we need to create? I just interject because I think you hit on something that everybody, they toss it out because they didn't produce something that they actually never designed their program for.
Yeah, yeah.
no, I agree.
Yeah, what Dylan said was so good. You got to start somewhere and don't give up on it. I mean, you can't steer a parked car. I'm so glad that we started when we did and just kind of hacked our way through it. But I would say this, don't start a leadership threshold training until you're ready to sell out to it. In the sense of like, it's not just something that we do. Leadership development is who we are. Because you either believe that we are truly called to equip the saints of ministry or you don't. And if you don't, then we got a bunch of doers running around. And that's where you see a lot of church staffs, overinflated budgets, because we don't want to ask people for too much. Well, the reason you don't want to ask them for too much is because you haven't equipped them to do the very thing you're asking them to do. So you start with the end in mind and you think about building that individual and you say, listen, when we do this, this is what we do because this is who we are. We lead people into a growing relationship and this with Jesus, and this is a part of it. So I think as senior leaders and those that are a lot of times going to try to maybe instill or launch something like this, let's get a core conviction first for our role within the body of Christ and why this is such a significant step in that.
This is when you guys, I'm exposing all of my other friends to my friends. This is when Brian gets spicy. I call him the spicy Brian.
No, this
He's
is
like,
soapbox stuff for me, man. That's soapbox stuff for me. All the jokes and everything is just me trying to like make people like me before I go in too hard on this part.
but he's like, ah, you better sell out to it or else. Uh,
Seriously
I
though,
love
like you either you either believe it or you don't.
right. So good. That's right.
Love that energy. We should go back and have more conversation about congruence in theology because that's where you'll get me fired up. That's it. I knew
Yeah.
I was trying to match. I'd have kept going on that one, but that's for another day.
Man, I feel like I came out two guns hot.
No, I love it. Man, you guys are incredible. I know, another way to help, is just phone a friend. So, I know you guys have always been available to help other churches with this concept. There is a reason I say that when we get to this and we talk about content, that they're like, well, who's doing this well? I love talking about what you guys have done. I don't share what you've done because I really do. I want churches to go through the process of developing their own content because it's your culture and you have to decide on the theological congruencies. You have to determine how you want them to practice the competencies the way that you're talking about, Brian. And now we can learn from each other, but it's like I'm almost held back. I have held back for so many years because it's like, you know what? it's worth us doing the work. You'll be far better owner of the end product because you've put the blood, sweat, and tears into making what you know your leaders need a reality. And how to distribute it? Some people are like, can we do it digitally, virtually? I would say yes, you probably could, but you're not going to get the end result you hope because life happens in the context of relationship development and that. So unless you guys think differently and you've proven it, I would say try to find some sort of small group classroom setting. It helps a ton. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
We're honored to be in your guys' flow. Love you guys. We'll talk soon.